Beyond the forbidden.
And we just want some answers, but none is ever given. But it gives us hope, and it fills my heart with joy, even though there is another side to this, because it gives us hope in the sense that we are much more, so much more than just biological entities with a sell-by date, and that we serve a system which does not give a damn about any of us. All it wants is money and power and total subjugation. I will not have it. And as for like going back into the World War II and World War I, most people saw and worked from one side and the other worked on the other, good and bad. But you had that balance, you see, and thank God that we are on the right side. That's all I can say. This phenomena changes you. You, as I said before, I used that word transmutation. There is a change, and it seems to reach into the soul. Michael, I will tell you, we all lose people we love to death, and that hurts. And then we only can rely on faith, on the conviction of that faith. And then when you find that that faith is flawed to some degree, and you realize that there is such thing as life after death, that there is continuation of consciousness, which one part of the establishment has tried to cover, to conceal. Going back, it's all very well to believe in a fairy tale and to promote it, because it's wonderful, it's delicious. But as soon as any confirmation of that fairy tale could become fact, it becomes dangerous territory. What's happened with me is that I'm not getting any younger. I hopefully still have some years left in me. But while I'm here, I am trying to make sense of what we are, where we come from, why we are here, and also trying to make sense of a system which has systematically lied to us. Not just, oh, it's all conspiracy. It has lied to us. Not just about the UFO, UAP reality. That gives us some hope, by the way, because we realize that we're not the only species that evolved through some kind of primordial soup, all by accident, chaos rather than order. Rubbish. But you'll have people telling you, no, Philip, no, you're not listening to me. We are dealing with whatever species from whatever planet, and I know their high command and all the rest of it. So interestingly, when I had my experience in 1989, there had been reptilians, 3 of them there, and I have to say then I was so embarrassed to mention it. It was horrific, and there were some greys, and then I get people telling me, oh, it's because the greys are subservient to the reptilians, and I've even been told, some people have told me what their names are and their level of high command. Please give me a break. It's hard. What's interesting is that they are turning people against people. They are wanting us to be divided. They want us to not be able to think. They want us to be like the greys. They're talking, for God's sake, about some kind of implant in the brain where all your thoughts will be accessed, and I believe that whatever force that we have here at this present moment in time, and I think it's one of the same, is so against the human, because we're very loving, we're very creative, and this is a centralized programming from this force that's in governance of us, whether or not people believe it to be human or archonic in nature. It doesn't matter. There is some kind of devolution of the soul that this system does not want to happen. And remember, just before we were all locked down through this terrible so-called tragedy, that people were starting to raise up, and every single time that the human begins to escape the rapture of this centralized negative programming consciously, there comes an event that comes in with real force to bring you back down again. So
the clamps of control. The clamps of control.
That's correct. Absolutely good terminology there. So it is fear primarily, I believe, that these entities use, that they feed from. But we do agree that the Greys are looking for something. And when they look into you, they're not looking at you, they're looking into you. It's almost like they're trying to find something. And I believe that something is part of what we call the soul, the spirit.
Become a member on Patreon to get full access to all exclusive content. A few of the perks is the full-length ad-free video version of the interviews, face-to-face interviews, bonus shows, and behind-the-scenes footage. You will also receive the video interview way in advance before the audio-only interview gets dropped on all platforms. Sign up and become a member today for only $3 a month. The link is in the description.
Thank you very much, and I'm very honoured to be back on your show again, Michael. And I do apologise, my goodness, last time I will say to you, we all agreed it from your end, and I forgot to put it in my diary. And I normally have communications on my mobile phone with all my networks, as well as the computers and laptops, which we all have. And when your message came through, I almost died. But you were very gracious in honouring me. And I am black and white. If there is a problem, I will tell you what the problem is. I won't skirt round it, I'll just tell you. And I think that's the best way to be in life. You know, when there's a problem, I made the mistake. I cocked up there.
Well, and we'll go and start here. I'll add the intro and all that. But I can't. I would be a hypocrite though, Philip, because man, I have goofed up many a time since 2010 with interviews, and sometimes I just straight out, like, I would forget about it because I forgot to write it down. Sometimes I would have computer problems, which I should have fixed the day before, or I should have made sure everything was working on my end the day before or several hours before, instead of waiting to the last minute. Just things happen, you know, but you live and learn. And I know I'm going to continue to make mistakes, but the best, just got to keep pushing on and just try to limit those mistakes. But yeah, like I told you right before, got a lot of positive feedback from my last interview. A lot of people were agreeing with me. Got a brilliant mind. And it's like I told you, you know, it's the way you can present, it's the way you present your information, very articulate, and just helping people understand the phenomena because it's so complex. But
definitely.
So
are we ready to record now?
Yes, we're recording now. Right. I'm going to add the I'm going to add the intro and all that. But so, in case of people didn't get to watch the last interview, which I'll give the link for everybody. Let's go ahead and just give a little background about yourself, just for the newcomers that didn't watch the last interview, Philip.
Yes, that's fine. Well, my name is Philip Kinsella, and I've been involved with UFO research for about 35 years. It doesn't make me in any way an expert, although sometimes people label you as such, but that is not the case. And it was all it all started really with the event of what we call an abduction back in 1989, in the winter of 1989, in the village of Master Mortain. And it's too long-winded to go into. And of course, at that point within my life, I considered whether or not, you know, the alien hypothesis that was so quite projected within Hollywood was not what it seemed, because there seemed to be a physical or non-physical element attached to that. And previous to that, age 13, with myself and my identical twin brother, we had seen a silver orb with our maternal grandmother in their big house in Middlesex in Tatchbrook Road. And that was an event that was very peculiar. So I then wanted to investigate the phenomena truly and from the heart, and to try and find out what this was. And we do change within our thinking, within our thoughts. We go through a process of transmutation, because many years ago, I considered that UFOs were non-terrestrial crafts coming from another planet, and the entities were perhaps coming from another star system. But I think a lot of what we've assessed and collated now, many decades later, is informing us that there is indeed a far more complex process involved. And this is something that will shatter literally the belief system of many individuals, and I have to state here, who have been programmed, and I repeat, programmed by our very own system to make us believe that there is no such things as UFOs, UAPs, and even, and dare I say it, which must be brought into the fray, the question of continuing consciousness, that is life after death. And people say, well, hang on just a minute. You know, we've got UFOs in one bracket and we have the afterlife in another. How on earth can you make parallels between those links? Well, we're beginning to find out that both of these links appear to operate on what we call an interdimensional connection. So this is where now my work has led me, not just because of the abduction back in 1989 and trying to work through several hypotheses about what these beings are and where they come from and how it is that we have hardly any proof whatsoever. So I then published an article in a magazine. It was accepted, called Spirits in the Material World, that was appeared in Alien Encounters magazine here in England. I'm sure it was in the States there way back. And that started me on the road to my investigations. And just before I finish here, I was a fool to be invited onto some major media outlets here in the UK. And I have to stress, I have never, ever once asked to appear on television or radio or anywhere. People have asked me, but in the early days, I foolishly went along with a big television company and they said, you know, you seem to have some important information, let's get you on the program. And it was a circus. So I then realized at that point how the media cartel kind of like try and denounce the subject matter and make you appear as though you are literally a crank. So in a nutshell, that's what happened. That's how I got involved with it.
So with your latest book, Terrestrial Trespassers,
yes,
you know, we talked about last time, we're going to go deeper into it this time.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and get into what you think, because I was going to save it towards the middle or maybe towards the end, because it's kind of an end question, but I'm going to flip it and ask you now, just because, you know, some people have limited attention. I know I've struggled with it for a long time, you know. Just some, you know, like when it comes to reading books, I can read for a couple of hours at a time, but sometimes I wish I could read all day, but I can't do it. So let's go ahead and get in this question here that I was going to save towards middle or end, but after lifetime dedication to this, you know, this multidimensional research and investigation that you've done, Philip, what is your personal conclusion as of yet? And I know we'll get more into it within the interview about this phenomena, about the phenomena's deepest nature and purpose at the point based on the available evidence. You know, what do you sense may lie beyond currently accessible data within the field of research, and what will it take to finally crack through conceptual bars built to contain our species within cultural limitations that we're abounded to?
Yes, it's a very, very multi-complex question.
And I know we'll get more into it within the interview. Yes,
absolutely. Well, my feelings, literally, and I'm never betrayed by anyone, you know, kind of like sucking me in to believe in this or that. And we are all entitled to our centralized belief systems, our structured systems of belief, as it were. But my take on this is that I think that there is a force that is operating that does not, it would seem, have our best interests at heart, or at least the phenomena does not want to connect with us as a human species. Now, this poses a big problem within the world of ufology, because you have those that are on one side, the love and light, and those on the other side that have their varied opinions about, you know, what these things are. I believe that we are actually dealing with an intelligence that is very superiorly advanced, highly advanced, and also, it must be stated, very much aware of how we as the human, the Homo sapien, operates. Now, this is interesting because although we have certain clues, certain data that is presented to us, not just eyewitness testimony or photographic evidence or film footage, or, you know, if I use the word radar, conviction. No, I think this is telling us something very serious indeed. I think what we're looking at is something that is an old force. It's been here for a very, very long time. And this is how the system that we serve is so clever within the way that it utilizes its own centralized programming to each and every one of us. We are all, as a human species, divided by opinion. And this works, and I have to just mention the system, those that are the puppet masters for their leaders. They know how to turn people against people. And when we address the UFO UAP phenomena, we also have to address our very own species, because one of the questions that has always baffled me, and I've never been able to get my head around this, in everything that we have learned in terms of our world, in terms of what we've been told, the official narrative of Genesis and all the rest of it, what I can't get my head around is the fact that, and a very simple example here, is that we're on a tiny little dot in the immensity of space that we don't even hardly know anything about. We'll get into the deep stuff later. And it's like, well, the system's telling us, no, there are no such things as UFOs, UAPs, and there is no such thing as life after death. It's all very well having a faith or a conviction in something because the system likes that, because there is no measurement with regard to scientifically or even theoretically to challenge that. So I think we have a major problem on our hands, because my thoughts about the phenomena may differ from someone else's, but I really believe that this force, this intelligence, has been here for a very, very long time. And this also denotes something that also, I believe, is connected to and within our antediluvian cultures. History has always been wiped clean from one epoch to the next, and there is no trace of the genus within those epochs that have, disappeared off the face of the earth. So we remain within our time. You and I and all of us are here now within this time. And we are going through another epoch of where we are scratching our heads and trying to put the pieces together. But I believe that systematically, we have been lied to by the system that we serve. And this system knows more about what's going on. Now, the question of whether or not we're being visited by extraterrestrials, also known as non-human entities now, and that was credited by Steve Mira, CEO of Zohar, a good and blessed friend of mine, and also Barry Fitzgerald from Ireland. Non-human entity seems to clarify that we may be dealing with a force that is much closer to home. And if we go back into the antediluvian cultures, we find sources of material, and most notably, as I know from a professor who actually had access to the Vatican files, and they have 50 miles of access of information that is hidden from the public. And she told Steve Mira, CEO, that you would not believe when you go back into our past what really happened, what was really going on, and the version that we have. So when we look at the Greys, and primarily they have been a species, if I may call them that I'm most notably interested in, they are fascinating, and because they're in vogue at this time. And I believe that perhaps this phenomenon, the force of which changes its face or the way that it presents itself to its unwitting victim or whomever. So I believe that we are dealing with an interdimensional species. There is questionable debate as to whether or not this force is primarily after its own ends, that it wants what it needs and will only have what it wants. It's not here to help us. And within the advent of ufology, with all different ideas about what these beings are, my big question is, where are they? Where is this information that they are supposedly here to help us? Where are they guiding us as a species? Because the way I'm seeing it is that our species is going through a form of devolution. And this is troubling, and even more so now than ever before. So I believe that we may be dealing with a force that is able to replicate, it is able to infiltrate our dimension very quickly and very easily. It knows us very well, but it wants something that we have that it perhaps does not have. And I think that goes much, much deeper and down that rabbit hole. And this is where people will say to you within ufology, I'm sorry, hold it right there. We can't open that other area of the psyche. We can't open that other area to life after death, or the survival of consciousness, all this type of thing that we're seeing here, because it's just going to blow our brains out. But there are connections to be made between the UFO, UAP, and those other interdimensional connections, i.e. near-death experiences, and even, let's take it further, shall we? The Dogman, Sasquatch, all of them seem to have key elements that connect one to the other. And very lastly, before I finish here, we as human beings, and I'm not including nature here, but we as human beings seem to be the only species that is so far removed from all of this phenomena that presents itself in such a bizarre fashion. So, this is very interesting because, it just tells us that we seem to be on our own. And I'm not saying that we're unique, but these other forces are very interested in us. And remind me also, Michael, to explain about how it is I feel that the phenomena is able to be drawn to certain individuals, why certain individuals are selected and others are not. That is another key component that I've been looking into. And I think that tells us a lot about this phenomena. And do those at the top of the symbolic pyramid of power know about them? Yes, I believe they do. The nameless, faceless bureaucrats, of course. And this is why when people say, oh, we're going to have disclosure or we're hope for disclosure, no. Because if disclosure was ever revealed, people, I believe, would be truly horrified. And it would be at that point when they will know that they have been lied to. Yes, and the control will dissipate, the control will collapse, and they can't have that.
Very well said, Philip. Like I said, you know how to put things into context where people can just understand it, the phenomena better, because it is, I keep saying it, it's so complex. And I like how you, and I wrote it down because I may use it in the title, Old Force Intelligence.
That's right.
Very true. Very true. It may go into the title. But so in chapter 10 of your book, The Terrestrial Trespassers, the other side of the coin, you said, quote, we could be dealing with entities which are so far removed from our reality, and one which is also interested within the working of human consciousness, and something they appear to know a lot about. Perhaps we need to speculate further on why it is the Greys go about secreting their mode of operations, hiding within the shadow of the mind like some bad dream. However, if we take the assumption that the Greys are indeed clones, then what we may be seeing is some type of hyper being which has removed itself from the physical dimension and resides in an altogether higher level of an alternate reality like that of the after death state. It's interesting also to consider that the Greys appear like blank canvases with no understanding of those essential qualities we humans take for granted. Have the Greys spiritually lost themselves through the act of replication and thereby yearning a soul, which they believe can be harvested through us as a species? Lastly, you say, although we are now going into uncomfortable territory, I believe it is necessary to try and see things in a new light.
Yes.
Well said.
Yes.
If you want to elaborate more or whatever, go ahead.
Yes. Well, after the abduction that I had in 1989, which to all intents and purposes had been, for me, embarrassing, and I just couldn't seem to put the pieces together. Do I understand it now? Have I put those pieces together now with another researcher did? But it's interesting because I had the only time in my life, people call it a download. I remembered I was at work, and all of a sudden it was as if my mind had opened. I never would have believed it. This is the thing, until you have been touched by the singularity. But I had this opening, and it was to do with the Greys. And I'm not saying that my theory is correct. We have to be open to certain models of conjecture. But I wondered how it was that the Greys were able to abduct an individual. And my understanding is that if I use this very loosely, quote unquote, the spiritual aspect, where there are two composites of us, well, three really. One is spirit, one is soul, one is the vehicle. And I believe that the part that makes us what we are, the greys can retract from us. So in instances of abductions, if someone is when they're going through the process of abduction and anyone's around them, like a partner or wife or whoever, they are knocked out. And the person doesn't really know how they get from A to B. I understood what happened with me because I was going through solid material. So I considered perhaps that the greys are able to retract the real essence of the blueprint of what you are into their domain, into their timeless, spaceless domain. Now, when you look at near-death experiences, if someone is dying and then they report that they pass over to the other side, they are in a state of eternity. There is no time. They communicate with their loved ones or spiritual masters through a process of telepathy. And if the physical body that they left behind, and I must mention this again, is in decay, or there is severe illness, terminal illness, on a lot of cases, you'll find that when that person returns back from their empirical state of a longevity, of eternity, when they return back to the body and they awaken, they're normally healed. Now, when a person is abducted, it is possible that the greys remove the real essence of you from your body. They take you into their domain where interaction is then possible, no different from the NDE interacting with loved ones on the other side. They have just merely passed from one state of vibrational link to another. So whatever the greys do to you will invariably affect its physical counterpart because they're still attached. There's still an attachment. Now, the greys are interesting. I kept thinking, and even from other researchers was suggesting here from their, if I use the word clients or their patients, as it were, that a lot of them were talking about some kind of hybridization program, hybrids as we all know them. Dr. David Jacobs, I've spoken to him at length with this many years ago. And it just seemed puzzling that you would have a species such as the greys that could not replicate, so we understand they appeared as clones, are interested in hybridization. Now that's interesting because, you know, what was it? Why would a species that can't produce go into some kind of bioengineering where they're able to replicate life itself? And this poses the question. The greys, I believe, it could be possible to suggest are outside the field of creation. Now, there are several hypotheses that we can take here. One of them is that, let's take an example. If we as a human species no longer began to reproduce, primarily reproduce, and we started to go into the process of cloning, replication, the big question is that my understanding is that there is some kind of soul connection or ultimate conscious connection that draws within the field beyond this level of reality, the other side, whatever you want to call it, and ingests within the incarnation process, within the embryonic formation of a child that comes into the womb. And in so doing, when the child goes through the birthing cycle, there is still an attachment from that child within the womb to its original source of origin, the other side. So this process of replication, of reproduction, is vital to our species. It makes us what we are. We are all individual, and I believe that we carry a spark of the divine as we go through that natural process of reproduction, of continuation. Now, the question is that if you are cloned and you no longer go through any form of reproduction, that it is basically replication, where is that spark coming from? So it's possible that the greys could have counseled themselves out of their own creation, and in so doing have lost the real essence of what they had originally been. They don't understand about color. They don't understand about taste, of smell, of love, of time. All these attributes that make you and I and everyone else so unique within our material composition, our biological composition. And I believe when you're looking at them, they're like soulless. And I know that Nigel Kerner, the brilliant Nigel Kerner, must be credited for his research, absolutely, suggests that perhaps we are dealing with some kind of AI construct. Well, I understand that and I respect that completely and utterly. As researchers, I will always respect everyone's the way that they view this reality. But I don't feel that a piece of AI mechanism would truly understand the true nature or the essence of the soul, because you're talking about something that goes beyond biology, that goes even beyond the mechanical nature of whatever something's created by in terms of machinery. But we do agree that the Greys are looking for something. And when they look into you, they're not looking at you, they're looking into you. It's almost like they're trying to find something. And I believe that something is part of what we call the soul, the spirit, the real essence of what makes us tick. Now, interestingly here, I kept going back, and even I'm 55 now, and the experience I had was in 1989. That was when I was 20. So there was two things that occurred that were truly disturbing. And through all the research that we've done and all the research that you're doing, and you will do yourself, Michael, you know, you never, ever, ever think that you are any lesser than anyone else, because every single person has their right to bring something new to the table. And through your brilliant mind, I believe that you yourself will be able to make parallels that's way out there. But two things happened to me. One of them was the intrusive investigation. And it was something that I can't find the words for. But you find this with a lot of people who have had the abduction. Even Barney Hill from the famous 1961 abduction of Betty and Barney in New Hampshire, when they were abducted. John G. Fuller wrote the book, The Interrupted Journey. Now, Kathy Marden, lovely friend, beautiful soul. She's been of great assistance and help. She was the niece of Betty and Barney, and they released information that Barney himself also had this uncomfortable and embarrassing procedure. And of course, the media cartel, of course, would take the mickey out of you. And I had someone say to me, you know, they're taking the butt end of the jokes of you. Well, that's fine. But we know that through these types of investigation, it is to do with the secretion of fluids also within the human. And I remember there was one part to the experience where, when I was being ejected from the craft, as it were, or told to leave, before the last part where the noddy type character was there, they showed me the image of a tree, a huge tree, and I couldn't understand what the symbology was with the tree. I couldn't work it out. And of course, we go back to the tree of life, to the tree of knowledge. And so what these Greys are doing, I believe that they cannot have what we have, no matter what they do, no matter what type of experimentation. It's almost as if they've been trying to figure out what is it that makes us tick? And they, as blank canvases, cannot seem to understand that. So I believe that the way that they go about this is that they kind of like connect with individuals that are different, not unique, because we're all unique. Every one of us is unique. But because there is something different about the energy frequencies that's being emitted by the individual. And that's another part that we have to talk about, because it's very interesting. And I think the system that we serve is aware of this. And are they in coalition with these darker forces, these alternative forces, these interdimensional beings, ultra-terrestrial beings? Who knows? But I am rather suspicious myself, because our system now, if you go back into the 60s, the 70s, we're experimenting with remote viewing, an extension of consciousness through military operations. And of course, the military, quite rightfully, would try to resource anything it could possible to advance its own technology, its own weapons divisions unit. So I believe that not the military guys, they're all sound guys, and the women as well, what wonderful souls, but those at the very top of the high of command that take their orders from those at the right of the top. So I believe that the system knows about this force, and that the whole idea of it being spacemen, and then of course placed into the X-Files and all sorts of things with the perfect image of the Grey, and let's put it out there, let's merchandise it. And of course, this is where the non-transparency works absolutely beautifully within the system that we serve, because people will say, oh no, you've been watching the X-Files, or oh no, you're mistaken. So there is so much confusion. And if you start to, part all of that, excuse my French, crap, that is kind of like piled on top of all of this, when you start peeling it away and looking at the rawness of what's going on, it tells us a different story entirely. So I believe that it's possible that the Greys are a genus that had fallen from grace. And this is a war, a silent war that's been going on for a very, very long time. Now, I do believe also that we have been created not by God, although we have a spark of that godliness energy, wherever that source is on the other side, but we have been created by gods that were no different from us, but they were kind of like more advanced, and we understand reptilian to a degree in nature. They were known as the Anunnaki, or better, the Archons. And even if I dare say this, and it's not just, ladies and gentlemen, Michael, the UFO subject we have to look into here, it starts to take you down other avenues, because you're like, well, hang on, when did this all start? It didn't start in the 1940s with the crashing of the craft in Roswell, or, anything like that, nothing like that. This has been going on for a very long time, but the way that our language translates this years ago was like, oh, there's arrows in the sky, or there's shields in the sky. But when you, for instance, look at the Bible, let's take the Bible, for instance, because that has a lot of really very strange occurrences happening in there. And I've always known for many long years that the version that we have is not the real version. And woe behold, we find out that it's not the original version. And it's been changed and altered. And there are a lot of books from the original authors that were all different. It wasn't all one author, they're all different authors. And when you go back here, you find, hang on a minute, these events that the Bible that we have today talk of are not quite the way that we've been led to believe. But what it does suggest is that there had been gods, quote unquote, known as the Anunnaki. And of course, there was interbreeding with certain creations that the Anunnaki or Archons had created before the model of the Adama or Adam was made with Eve. And so, when you get involved with ufology, most people would just want to look at the nuts and bolts. Totally understandable. They just want to see the physical side to it. But when you start exploring into the non-physical elements, or those areas of uncomfortable territory where there was a divide originally from one to the other, like life after death and UFOs in that box and cryptids in there and whatever, when you start joining the dots, you can see that there are connections to be made, uncomfortable connections to be made. So I believe, like Dr. Jack Valet, and I was very honored to have met the guy in the United States of America. I shook his hand. I gave him a letter, but I didn't get anything back because he's a busy man.
Yeah.
But I have to say to you, he's a cool guy. But I believe, like he, that this force has changed its face to suit what's in vogue. But you'll have people telling you, no, Philip, no, you're not listening to me. We are dealing with whatever species from whatever planet, and I know their high command and all the rest of it. So interestingly, when I had my experience in 1989, there had been reptilians, 3 of them there. And I have to say then I was so embarrassed to mention it. It was horrific. And there were some greys. And then I get people telling me, oh, it's because the greys are subservient to the reptilians. And I've even been told, some people have told me what their names are and their level of high command. Please give me a break. It's hard enough for us trying to deal with the reality of the phenomena without giving me a name and their high command, because even that won't do me any good. You fix me a meeting with them, I'll go and see them, I'll go and speak to them. That's not going to happen anytime soon. But the reptilians are interesting. And this is where it gets really cranky because people are like, hang on just a minute, you know, where do they fit in the equation? But if we go back into the past, you will find that the reptilians are very much prevalent. And if you look at all the churches and a lot of the gargoyles on them, and you know, you'll see these dragons everywhere, you know, the worship of the serpent. And some people have suggested, well, it's just literally a symbolism of the model of the DNA strands, you know, of the double helix and all that type of thing. And I'm like, no, that this is to do with the dragons. So yeah, that's a really long-winded answer to your question, Michael.
Well, I like to be especially someone that's, you know, spitting out this information. I don't want to cut off people and have these breaks like certain bigger platforms do, where you know, they ask you a low ball question and then a minute later they'll try to cut in and try to ask you another low ball question, you know, or a simplistic question. But very well said. And oh man,
well, we can go to the part of where and how it is.
You hit me with a lot of things there. That's why I wanted, but you were doing it brilliantly. Kind of, you were kind of taking me down this little road, my mind's just going down almost like I'm reading a book while I'm listening to you, you know. What path do you want to go down now? I guess since you brought up the reptilians, because, you know, last time we talked about the archons, and you know, I know you've talked about the Greys being clones. Are the reptilians also clones? Are the reptilians and the Greys one and the same thing? Is this force, this manufactured force, whatever, this old force intelligence that you talked about, is it the Archon complex, or this parasite that, you know, Dr. Carla Turner talked about the mask, that they can put this inside your subconscious, you know, like a virtual reality scenario. Yes. And they make you see what you want to see, like fairies, elves, reptilians,
dead people,
Greys,
your dead relatives,
dead people. But do you think that they're two different things, or are they one and the same thing with the reptilians and the Greys?
That is a good question, and I don't know, but I can theorize.
Yeah, well, I want to know what. Yes, okay. People, I think theorize. What does your gut tell you, Philip?
My gut feeling tells me that the reptilians are real. And, you know, if you'd asked me that question about 15 years ago, I would have laughed all the way to the leads. But as was said, it's strange, because when you'll find here, Michael, that when you start getting into this, where you are at this present moment of time, you will go through a process of transmutation, because your mind is starting to translate a lot of information that was originally rejected by the official narrative. Now, the reptilians, I believe in most definitely, because there's been a lot of reports of them, and it's almost as if the system we serve is at pains to take anything down that concerns reptilians. It's really weird. I mean, not so much the Greys, they want to promote them, like get them up there in Hollywood and show them, but when it comes to the reptilians, it's just an uncomfortable layer that I'm like, well, they don't want people to know about the reptilians. And I know that
you're a David Icke conspiracy theorist.
Yes, and I saw him talk live. Was it last year? Brilliant man.
He is very brilliant, very brilliant. I have all of his books, The Children of the Matrix, The Big Conspiracy, and yes, I may not agree with everything, but he makes you think. No. That's the big thing. And a lot of things that he talked about back then that people, oh, I can't stand David Icke. He's a loose cannon. He's a nut job. You know, he's wacko. But a lot of the talking points within those books from like 20, 30 years ago, they're using those same terms and talking points and innuendos and all that thing, all those things today. You're using the same things that he was talking about then.
That's right.
And you're making fun of the guy, you know? Like, what the hell, man?
It's interesting because you're right. And with regards to the reptilians, it would make sense that if they were the overlords and they were the ones that were running the show, they would obviously have something or work with something or create something or, you know, utilize something. And I know this is going against the other hypothesis with regards to the Greys counseling themselves out of creation now. I've got another point to raise here, very interesting.
Take your
because
time.
the Greys seem to be subservient to these beings, and it could be that the Reptilians hide within the shadows and use them as their main force to get to whomever, while they remain discreet and out of the picture. Now, if you go back into the past, the model of man went through varied mutations genetically, as we understand. And I'm not talking about the evolutionary model. I'm talking about the genetic model that was created and generated by, and quote unquote, our gods, as it were. Now, we were not originally meant to reproduce. We weren't meant to reproduce at all. We were created as a slave labor force. Well, I joke and say all the time, nothing much has changed today, has it?
Mm-hmm.
Because what is this? We're all still slaves to the system to this day. But it's interesting because the overlords had some kind of agreement and disagreement, I have to say here, about the reproduction process. Now, this brings into the story, or this kind of like reality, but the fabled version that we have of Adam and Eve. Now, is it possible that these overlords, before they came to this world, before they originated within our star system, had utilized the same form of genetic experimentation with another life form and had generated or created the Greys who cannot reproduce? And that these Greys have found a signature of their masters here, and this is why they are connecting with us to find out, well, if we were denied the process of reproduction and continuation in whatever form that they inhabit, whether or not it's an astral form or a physical form, biological form, sorry, they're probably here trying to work out, well, here's a new species that's been created by these beings, but they can reproduce, and they've got something more than we have, and we want a part of that. So, you know, this whole thing, I believe, stems back into the antediluvian culture, and is still here today. Now, the other really interesting part is this. When we take in aspects of the afterlife, we know to a degree that there are several spheres or several levels, as we do within our in our chakra system. In our energy system, which has been proven, we have energy, and we are energy signatures that's vibrating. And I believe that with regards to the other side, as it were, the question also, another part here that we can bring into the phrase, that if they are damned souls, that they are soulless, that they have been sent to an abyss somewhere, and that they are trying out this process of hybridization to bridge the gap, to get them into our world on this level, because we come into this world in the biological sense. People say, well, where do I come from? Well, we understand about the concept of the other side, and perhaps of as the ultimate God source, or the ultimate force of all consciousness. But it's interesting that these beings could also be trying to slingshot themselves from their realm into ours. Now, what's interesting, I also discovered that within the astral planes, within the level up, apparently everything is created within the mind there. And if it's strong enough, it can actually bring itself forward into our realm. And the Greys, stepping aside the Reptilians for a moment, the Greys, I believe, are like a parasite that connects in with our human psyche. So they have access to all of our memories and all of our hopes, desires, fears. They're able to, like a mobile phone network system that we have. And that's why I always use the mobile phone analogy, which is a very simple example to use. You've got the physical hardware and people think that's the phone. No, it's not. The signal is the phone with a bit of energy, as we have energy and consciousness, which permeates our form. Your phone records, transmits, receives information as we do. And if your phone should die, your information is sent on a purely technical level into a cloud. People say, well, where do you go when you die? Well, I ask them this. Well, where does the signals to your phone go? What's holding all that information together? That's purely on a technical level, on a human level that we've created. Now, the Greys, I believe, are separate from us in terms of their sovereignty, spiritual sovereignty, and they're able to get into us and have access to our information. So I believe that it's possible that they are some form of devolution. Although they're very clever and they're smart, they know a lot about us because they can read minds.
They're
They
a
can
form
read
of
our
entropy.
minds. Sorry?
They're a form of entropy.
Definite. And I just get this feeling they're able to infiltrate into our system, into what we are, what makes us tick. And they're very clever. And the way they do it is like, wow, you know, no one, who would believe you? Oh, I've had an experience with the Greys. I saw them last, not that I have, I saw them in 1989. I saw them and people say, you're crazy, right? You're crazy. And this is the nasty part of it. We have not just them that come in and out of the shadows like ghosts in the night and connect with us on a, you know, almost like a physical level, but also that we have a system that's telling us there's a load of old bonkers. It doesn't exist. So what is that telling us? What is that telling us about this phenomena? Is it good or is it bad? Well, they may not see it as bad, but it certainly isn't good in my eyes. I can tell you that now.
Wow, man, Philip, this won't be the last time you come back on this show. I tell you, man.
I'm sure you'll get bored of me at some point, Michael.
Well, man, I love how you make me. And whenever you said, man, I was just shaking my head. You were saying, how the Overlords or whoever created this, you know, maybe they went to another planet out somewhere else in the universe and they genetically modified, tampered, and, you know, engineered that what later would become the Greys, and they're missing what we have, and that's why they're coming here, because they want to get closer to their creator and find out about us. The way I'm like, whoa, I never thought about it like that.
And what's interesting, I had that theory many years ago. I put it in Terrestrial Trespassers, but the film Prometheus.
Oh yeah.
Some filmmakers are very clever in the way that they bring something into the narrative. And when you watch that, that is about the humans wanting to find out, you know, who created them. And of course, you get the overlords there, don't you? The big guys that are like the geneticists that have created the alien that was supposed to be a virus. And then she was led off afterwards, one of the doctors, the female doctors who survived, to try and find out who created them. So it's like a chicken and egg conundrum. But the theory with regards to that does suggest that it's possible that our overlords are creators and geneticists. Brilliant, absolutely amazing. But something has happened where they, I believe, haven't got quite what we have, because we are so far removed from them. Remember, we are designed and created as the hominid. We are earth-based in terms of our biological structuring. The question is, where does that source of consciousness, the soul, the spirit, come from? And this may be something that our overlords did not understand or could not put together. You understand? Because it's like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. She created a being and she wanted to bring it to life, and she used electricity, quote unquote, to try and give it a soul. So I believe that this drama, you know, when we look at it in certain ways, it is amusing and something that we can postulate and work towards in terms of this synthesis. But at the end of the day, we are dealing with a real force of phenomena that continuously eludes and turns one researcher against the other, not in a negative way, but in terms of argument. I always believe in good arguments, in constructive arguments, in good theoretical debate, you know, like a bunch of ladies and guys getting around a table and bashing it all out, but also being respectful of other people's opinions, which we don't get a lot of within this field of research. So I believe that the way that the system works is interesting as well. And there's something else I need to tell you. We have been programmed, literally, and you can see, God help us, you can see what's happening in the world now, how the system is turning people against people. Now, there is a part here that does, I want you to understand, there may be a connection here. The system that we're serving is turning people against people. Since the terrible thing that was meant to have occurred some years ago now that had everyone locked down, there's been some kind of great reset. And I believe that the system we serve is now utilizing its own ends to bring about this agenda. I believe those people at the top, those nameless, faceless bureaucrats, people call them the Illuminati and say, oh, it's been in the films, it must be fiction. No, it isn't. By far is that fiction. What's happening is that I believe that they are working towards an agenda. And what's frightening is that it's almost as if whatever force is operating, and it could well be the Archons, it could be still the same force that was operating all the way back then, because they are basically immortal gods, as they were known as gods. Their longevity was, they create, by the way, the model of man was tampered with so that we would not live to a good age. 70 years and 10, I think it was meant to be. But what's interesting is that they are turning people against people. They are wanting us to be divided. They want us to not be able to think. They want us to be like the Greys. They're talking, for God's sake, about, you know, some kind of implant in the brain where, you know, all your thoughts will be accessed. And, you know, and I believe that whatever force that we have here at this present moment in time, and I think it's one of the same, is so against the human, because we're very loving, we're very creative, because the Archons can't create. They have no form of understanding of love or creation, but we have those attributes which are quite incredible, where we can create music, literature, films. We love, we can love, we feel passion, we feel that drive, the very essence of what makes us what we are that they don't have. So
they want to keep us from our full and truest potential.
That's right. And they don't want us to be connected to that divinity that we are all linked to. And if they can, they'll bring you down. Now, there's a lot of people out there, I believe, and this is I'm not a conspiracy theorist here, but there's a lot of famous people, rich people, powerful people who've been bought by them, and they're given all the money and all the honors and everything. And a lot of these people, even in the music industry, you'll find, like, no, I can't do this. It's almost like they go through some form of retribution and they want to give everything away. It's like, I can't have this, I don't want it, because they know that their point in time here will come to an end. And the big question is, whose side are you going to be on? And I'm not religious. I have a belief in the afterlife. I'm not a scientist, but I have a kind of like a scientific understanding or analysis of my belief in that on the other side and all what's going on here. So it amuses me to think, I kept thinking to myself, okay, so these nameless, faceless bureaucrats running the show are probably in connection with this other force that people would never be able to believe. I mean, that's why in the heyday, the churches were predominant and also against any form of heresy. And do you know why? Because they did not want people to think for themselves. They would say to you that, you know, you're a witch and you'll be burned or you'll be drowned. If you use your mind outside that box, we can't have that. Let's bring that fear in.
You can't challenge the established norm in society.
That's right. And anyone that does will pay the price. But what's happened now is that the infrastructure within the religious circles is collapsing, and people have started to become more open, more aware, more questioning. And of course, the system can't have that because it wants to subjugate human consciousness. It wants on that level, it's always had it in control. So the other thing that I wanted to say here, without jumping too much before I forget it, and I think it's an interesting part you might find for your crew here, is what makes us different? Why do people like ourselves go through these experiences? There are people I know that's never seen a UFO, that's never had any type of psychic phenomena whatsoever.
I wrote that down. You know, how do you feel?
I saw you write it down, Michael.
Yeah, how you feel the phenomena is attached to certain individuals and not others, you know.
Yes, that is very interesting. So when you do your research, Michael, and you know, and I just feel with you that you'll go a long way with regards to not just asking the right questions, but formulating your own conclusions. But you'll find that this system is very crafty and very uncanny in the way that it is able itself, through perhaps current technology, to infiltrate our human thinking. It knows how to deal with behavioral science. It knows how to kind of like perform these procedures where they can bring fear and control into an individual. Now, I'm sure the system, when I say they, I mean the system, I believe that they have a huge organization that is able to keep an eye on everyone. Data, information, you name it, they'll have it on you. And most people, God love them, are law-abiding, good citizens. They just go about their business, they do their job, they work from 9 till 5, they pay their taxes, they toil the soul, they don't ask any questions, and then they die. But those people who are not on that level, that have kind of like started to ask questions or starting to use their minds in different ways, probably come up with a big like warning, warning, warning. We need them to come back down to that level of conscious subjugation. We can't have them coming out of that bubble now, can we? And two things here before I carry on with that. Have you noticed, and I've done this experiment many times before, there are days where I've been as happy as Larry. I'm going to be really happy today. I'm going to be really positive. There ain't nothing, as you guys in America, there ain't nothing, man, that's going to bring me down. Hey, man. But then when you go through that, there will be some situation that will bring you straight down. The same within, yeah. And now I believe that the system, or not just the system, but those forces that are in control are aware of this. And this goes really deep, and they will do it. They will send whatever they can, as, you know, utilizing people as puppets to bring you down. But there are certain people who won't be leveled to that lower level of conscious awareness, the programmable state. And what they do then is they send their forces, or these forces, in to investigate. They want to know what it is that makes you different. Why are you ticking differently from your fellow human being? What is it about you that we can do to find out what it is? Because do you see where I'm coming from here, Michael?
Oh yeah, and Dark City portrays that very well in that movie.
I haven't seen that.
You need to watch Dark City.
I'll have to write that down.
That's why I have that. And also They Live, John Carpenter's They Live.
I've seen that. Yeah.
But yes, it portrays pretty much very close in Dark Cities of, oh man, you need to, that's why I have it right there behind me, because these are some of my favorites. Dark City, They Live, The X-Files, and this one you can't see is the Matrix. But Dark City, please watch that. Everything you're talking about, Dark City. Everything you're talking about, it will blow your mind.
Yeah, I need my mind blowing. I can tell you, I need it blowing more, because I need to understand more, because, you know, we're trying to put the dots together here. So when you've been touched by the singularity as a child, and I mean as a child, going back into your childhood, because there are events that happened, and I claim nothing, but I know there were strange things that occurred, and researchers have been very helpful in assisting. You know, people say, oh, I've been abducted. No, I have. I may well have done then, but I have no knowledge of that, so I cannot claim that. You will find that on a psychic level, that these forces are very clever. They know how to come in, and they know how to screw up your mind. Not that mine's screwed up, but they know how to get in there. And on a level where and this is why some researchers, one of them in England, an author of The Dark Gods, I had him talking to me years ago now, when we had the old telephones. And this guy was crazy. I mean, God love him. He was so frightened because he thought that they were coming from him. He was calling me in a telephone box. And you know what was really strange, Michael? I'll tell you here, and I'll never forget it. And I've dealt with some very strange things, some really incredible things that are there on the ball, and I will report only what I get. But every time I kept asking him, please let me have your address, because in those days we didn't have the mobile phones. And every time I tried to write the address down, I couldn't write the address down. I couldn't make sense. He was telling it to me, but I couldn't write it down. Unfortunately, the author committed suicide, so he is no longer with us, and I couldn't help him. And it was not at that point, but he was obviously going through a lot. So when you're dealing with this subject matter, you have to walk a very careful path. I will say that to any of your prospective or researchers who are watching this, please be very careful, because it can start getting in here. And you know, because there's so much attached to it.
Exactly.
And the system knows that.
This research will put you in contact with the dark night of your soul and quick and in a hurry.
Right.
Man, you it's, you know, doing this for a long, in these interviews for a long time, I faced that. It's these up and down, you know, almost like this bipolar reality, this hamster wheel, you know, that's because it's, you have to crawl through the depths of hell or through the rabbit hole to try to better understand it. But the thing is, trying to get back out of the rabbit hole and just try to step back and reflect, and, you know, man, it's a struggle, you know. And then you have these outside forces, you know, this system, this rigged reality that we live in, you know, that brings you down. And, you know, it's hard to stay on that straight path, knowing that you're being attacked from this rigged reality. But at the same time, you want to keep going down that rabbit hole too. It's almost like you got to find that balance, that yin yang, you know, to counterbalance, you know, because to counterbalance the dark with the light, light with the dark, you know. But at the same time, we need the dark, you know, because we can't live in light all the time. Just like our sleep cycle, we can't, you know, we're meant to sleep in dark. You know, it's almost like a metaphor of our own subconscious, our own psyche. We need the dark, but we got to have a healthy balance, though, Philip.
Yes, absolutely, and that is key, because one of this phenomena changes you. You, as I said before, I use that word transmutation. There is a change, and it seems to reach into the soul. Michael, I will tell you, we all lose people we love to death, and that hurts. And then we only can rely on faith. On the conviction of that faith. And then when you find that that faith is flawed to some degree, and you realize that there is such thing as life after death, that there is continuation of consciousness, which one part of the establishment has tried to cover, to conceal. As going back, it's all very well to believe in a fairy tale and to promote it because it's wonderful, it's delicious. But as soon as any confirmation of that fairy tale could become fact, it becomes dangerous territory. What's happened with me is that I'm not getting any younger. I hopefully still have some years left in me. But while I'm here, I am trying to make sense of what we are, where we come from, why we are here, and also trying to make sense of a system which has systematically lied to us. Not just, oh, it's all conspiracy. It has lied to us, not just about the UFO, UAP reality. That gives us some hope, by the way, because we realize that we're not the only species that evolved through some kind of primordial soup, all by accident, chaos rather than order. Rubbish. It's other things as well, too, the UAP phenomena, you know, and life after death. So this is what's interesting also about what makes you, like yourself, Michael, and myself, the people that we are, and why it is that we appear to be interfering buggers when it comes to trying to dig out the truth of what we're dealing with here. And, you know, you are attacked. You're attacked not just by the system that we serve, or not by your fellow human beings that are around you and those that don't know you, but also within the fraternity itself from other so-called individuals, researchers who have their own idea about what this is all about. And of course, you also get that part where the ego comes in and it's like, no, I've got to be number one and I've got to find the answers. I want the holy grail of it, but it belongs to every single one of us. We are all part of the phenomenon. It doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor, famous, that's a laugh, or not. It doesn't matter. What's important is digging and exploring. And yeah, you're right, Michael. I love the way that you're bless you indeed. You're so full of humility, and we do have those moments where we are down, where we lose a little bit of faith, or we're not understanding of what's going on. Sure, I've been attacked, and I've had the most cruelest, vilest things said about me that people have made out about me that they think they know me and they don't know me at all. Well, you carry on, because I just stand back now and watch and smile. You make of me what you will, but I'm just serving your interests to try and bring that truth, like many other good researchers are, to the table, to prove to you that there is more to your existence than mere flesh and blood with a sell-by date, and you die, and that all of this makes no sense whatsoever. This is a big picture that we're trying to paint and observe from a distance when we have crafted its beauty. But unfortunately, those in the system just keep throwing black paint all over it and destroying it. But we will fight, no matter what odds are against us, we will fight. It reminds me a little bit about in World War II, when you had the Gestapo and no one could really understand or trust other people. It got to that point where, you don't know who you were. I'm not talking about you, Michael, or anyone else, but, in the UFO movement, what they're after, what they want, what it is that they're looking for. But I believe that the truth is to be found in you at the end of the day. And I believe that you are the source of your own creation and that you hold the keys. You hold the unfolding plan to your destiny, to your whole evolution. So you're a smart guy, Michael, and I think when we're talking about this subject matter, the good news is that we haven't been certified yet. That's
Man. Well, maybe this question that I have for you will kind of be a interlude to that. Because I think I asked you this on the last podcast, but I can find it here. I think I asked you on the last podcast, not sure, but there, of course, there's gonna be newcomers to the interview. See if I can find it here. I know I have it somewhere. Okay, so and then you can take this anywhere you want. So we know that there's something going on, with the soul, consciousness. Yes. And you talk about earlier, I heard you say, I don't remember exactly what you said, but you said something about a woman being pregnant or something like that along those lines, or with a fetus. There's something along those. I'm paraphrasing what you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But it brought up the question that I may have asked you before, but I'm going to ask you again. And then you can go on that, expand on this and bring into your new research.
Understood.
And I love how it all interconnects. I love how your next book will kind of connect with the previous. And I love that. But so let's use, and I've mentioned this many a times before on other podcasts. So let's use the Wi-Fi computer metaphor. I would say our brain is like a hard drive, and our pineal gland acts like the transmitter that can pick up these Wi-Fi signals, such as a computer. Our soul could act in similar ways that a Wi-Fi signal does to all computer-related devices. Maybe when we are in the womb of a pregnant woman, aka our mother, possibly in the developmental phase of that fetus, maybe that woman's pineal gland picks up and transmits an incoming Wi-Fi signal, aka the soul or consciousness. And somehow it transmits that signal to the child, to the fetus, to the baby.
Yes.
And could that be a reason why they are keeping us in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety, so that these entities, or whatever they are, the Greys, the Overlords, or whoever, Archons, so that they can hack the incoming soul, aka Wi-Fi signal, before it becomes implanted into the baby? But maybe that's why they're keeping us in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety, because maybe it plays a role with a pregnant woman. Maybe that's why they experiment on women and fetuses and things like that. Maybe they're trying to hack this signal before it comes into the baby. What's your thoughts on all that?
Well, that's very interesting. And I would go along with that. There is some truth in that. I believe that we have to be open to that conjecture, most definitely. What's interesting is that we know that biologically, when a fetus comes into the womb, it will, of course, absorb most of the DNA from the mother. That much is true. And there has been the suggestion that all that's happening is that when people remember past lives, all they're doing is that some kind of intergenerational memory that's been linked. Now, if that was the case, the human being would be overloaded psychically to the point of madness. So I believe that it's possible that these archons have hacked the system. Now, what's interesting, another form of speculation here, and one that I did reject outwardly many long years ago, not through publications, but my own thinking, but now has come to fruition. I kind of understand. And a lot of other researchers feel the same way, that we seem trapped. Why would we incarnate onto this planet? And if there was a process whereby that we mapped out our entire existence on the other side to come onto this earth plane in a war-torn country, as poor as hell, you know, going through the most terrible, horrific experiences in order for us to learn, to gain understanding. What is this? This doesn't make any sense to me. I believe that what you're saying here is true, that the real essence of what we are comes into the womb. And once the gestation period begins, it's possible at that point that it is hacked, literally hacked, that maintains this feeling of being trapped within this cycle of incarnation, reincarnation. Now, there's also the suggestion I heard of for false light, that when you pass over, not to go to the light, that a good friend of mine suggested that you call out to the real spirit, the real God, the real light, and not the false light. The question is fear. Every single day in nearly all media outlets, what do we have? Negativity, fear, destruction, horror. It goes on and on and on. And this is a centralized programming from this force that's in governance of us, whether or not people believe it to be human or archonic in nature. It doesn't matter. There is some kind of devolution of the soul that this system does not want to happen. And remember, just before we were all locked down through this terrible so-called tragedy, that people were starting to raise up. And every single time that the human begins to escape the rapture of this centralized negative programming, consciously, there comes an event that comes in with real force to bring you back down again. So
the clamps of control, the clamps of control. Yes.
That's correct. That's a good terminology there. So it is fear primarily, I believe, that these entities use, that they feed from. And people will say, well, how can something feed from fear? Well, remember, they are off-world. They are not wholly part of our creation, although that they had allegedly created us, but we are so different from them. And I believe that this hacking, centralized hacking system on a psychic internet, I call it, is interesting, because I believe that these forces do come in and try to override or temporarily stop that individual from connecting within their real source, because it's like they're trapping you or they're holding you in. So, you know, if you was to say that to, God love them, someone on the street, they'd be like, oh, you're mad, go away, I don't want to hear about it. But this phenomena is so complex. And what's really interesting here is that we are beginning to find that this area, once considered as nuts and bolts within its construct, it seems to be far from it. I've said again that when this force comes into our reality, and in those cases, which I do believe, of downed so-called sources or craft, we hear sometimes of a certain material that is alien, and the rest seems to be part Earth. Now, I know another researcher, quite a famous guy here, a lovely guy called Mark Ollie, and he did a book on an object that crashed on Earth. I can't remember exactly at this moment because my mind's filled with all this stuff, but his name's Mark Ollie. You can check him out.
I'm in communication with him right now.
Yeah, he's a lovely guy.
It's kind of hard to set up a schedule with him right now because of the time frames he's given me, and you know, you're 6 hours ahead of me right now.
Yeah,
but I will get him on to everybody listening.
Yeah, so I believe that this force integrates itself with or morphs into our reality through thought. Now, we create from thought. Thought is reality. Thought is the centralized processing of what we are. And it's filtered through to the brain, the hard drive, as you call it. I love that terminology. And of course, we create from the mind. But because we are in a physical system of reality, we have to find the materials in order to bring the image or the inspiration to the fore, to bring it forward. And that is why we as humans are very artistic, are very creative. But I believe that this force is able to replicate itself quite quickly into our dimension, but also needs to have a composite of what we are, what we represent within the earth, whether it be rock, metal, biology, you name it. And it reminds me a lot, and we've said this before, I'm sure, of The Thing, that truly horrific film by John Carpenter, although it was created from another film, but The Thing, where the alien entity had crashed and it would absorb through replication its victim. Mm-hmm. And if there was anything like that here, Michael, you can bet your bottom dollar I'll be working on a ship to get me off this planet, because I won't want to be anywhere near it. That scared me senseless. But I think that within these crashed objects, there is always an element that is slightly strange, and they don't know what that is. And I believe that this force is this connection comes into our reality. People would see it like a psychic way, psychic buildup, but we also know that the psychic part is real because of remote viewing, the extension of human consciousness that can facilitate itself out of our space-time temporarily. In the military, we're working on those operations. Quite fascinating. We know that Ingo Swann, a psychic and artist, was responsible for a lot of that back in the heyday. He's passed over now, but we can see that that this force could perhaps be remote influencing itself within our dimension of reality. That means to say that it will create itself within our dimension of awareness. And this is why we have to go back to not just UFOs, UAPs as they call them, or aliens or extraterrestrials or now non-human entities, but the Dogman and the Sasquatch, and even repeating myself here from last show, I think I may have mentioned this, I'm not sure, but Paul Sinclair, a brilliant researcher of the Truth Proof books here in England, been doing a lot of research in the Dogmen that have been seen here, but we call them werewolves here. And one of them was seen wearing an earring in its ear. It was wearing an earring in its ear. And we have this mind speak with these beings on some occasions from some reports where the being actually is communicating with the individual. And what do? They base this whole experience upon fear. There was one case I remembered where some people were not even perturbed by the appearance of the Dogman, and it didn't know what to do. It just kind of like just went away. There was so, you know, whether or not we're dealing with one alternative force or varied parts of that force remains to be seen. But I do believe that this is a war that's been going on for a very long time, a silent war. And it is to do with certain that we would call gods that perhaps are no different from what we are, but a separate species altogether, and have elevated themselves to the status of this godliness. But this war is still continuing. And I believe that the way that we're looking at it has turned drastically from the 1980s through the 1990s and now where we stand today. So a lot more people are starting to look into the psychic component. It was something I wrote about many long years ago and was considered daft. Although they said it was revolutionary within its speculation, I was not the first. But with regards to the abduction and also the Greys, yes, in terms of how it was possible they were able to bring someone into their field frequency of awareness and matching the Greys to an interdimensional being rather than a physical being. And quickly here, Betty and Barney Hill case is a classic example in New Hampshire in 1961. Barney saw the craft, got out the car, saw it through the binoculars, and there was some beeping sounds on their car after their abduction, and the whole abduction came across as a dream-like quality. It's possible that the force had entered through to their consciousness and brought forth whatever they needed and wanted them to see.
Wow, man, I can't wait for you to watch the Dark City.
I will watch it.
A description: John Murdoch. It was from 1998. John Murdoch awakens alone in a strange hotel to find that he is wanted for a series of brutal murders. The problem is that he can't remember whether he committed the murders or not. For one brief moment, he is convinced that he has gone completely mad. Murdoch seeks to unravel the twisted riddle of his identity. As he edges closer to solve the mystery, he stumbles upon a underworld controlled by a group of ominous beings collectively known as the Strangers. But the end, It's great, and it may help with some of your, may open doors, avenues with some of your research for your next book. Never know. But and
the next book, yes, and I was just digesting what you were saying there, and this is really, really delicate territory and something that will never be able to be proven by fact, because some people, I believe, can be remote influenced, God help us, by the system we serve through weapons technology, psychic weapons technology. Again, this is something that I found very hard to believe in the heyday. But as I said, you will go through this change. And when you start looking into it and putting the dots together, you're like, hang on just a minute. So, you know, there was a case also of a guy that dressed up as the Joker, I believe, and went to a cinema and shot a lot of people. And he didn't know what on earth had happened. This is where we have to be extremely careful, because people will say, I'm going to have you for this. But it's possible that the system can experiment on these psychic experimentations, psychic warfare, to see how they can control individuals. Indeed, within the Weapons Divisions Unit, they have been working on psychic experimentation for a very long time. And I believe that that is absolutely possible. It's very frightening. In terms of its application of how it can just arrest someone and take over. We don't know. And this also poses the question as whether or not, I've been asked, do the military have their hand and claws connected with these greys, or reptilians, if we can use that now, in terms of like this abduction program? Well, it's a little bit complicated. I doubt very much that the military, with all their might, would then call upon the greys to go and abduct someone, but the greys are actually some kind of artificial construct from the military to make the person believe they're being abducted by the greys. What a waste of time. I mean, you know, you just knock the person out and then do what you wanted to do and bring them back again. So I believe that that is another aspect that's been utilized to muddy the water of serious research. I'm not saying that the military don't have any connections with the so-called UFOs, UAPs. I don't doubt that those at the top do have that kind of interaction, but not on a level that we could ever comprehend. So I believe that the system that we serve, and this is at pains to conceal the truth, because they know that the public, a programmed public, cannot be unprogrammed, because they will know that as soon as they release that information, that people will say to the system that we serve, hang on a minute, you have been lying to us. And at that point, the system will literally collapse. It's not about religious belief or anything like that. People wouldn't care if they were told that UFOs are coming from Zeta Reticuli and they're all here to give us world peace and give us technology undreamt of to help our species. No, people would welcome it. No, there is a darker aspect to this, I believe, a much darker aspect. And those people at the top know about this. And this is why they're at pains, even at the Pentagon right now, to bury it, because that's what they want. They don't want any transparency. I would, however, be absolutely, totally amazed to be able to go and see myself, like many other people, this material, or the objects, as well as the biological forms, the non-human entities that they have. Well, they would be on ice. They'd be a bit in a bad way if they weren't. But I'd love to view them, to see them. And doesn't this system realize that there are, like yourself and many other people, there are brilliant people that if they allow them access, under strict conditions, of course, to analyze and look at it, that they may be able to help towards solving this big problem? Because even if the system has got a problem, and let's say they're not working hand in claw with them, and that they can't control this force, well, you know, why don't you get a load of ufologists in, sit them around a table and discuss it? Let's put everything on the table. We did that with Parliament here, I did, to try and get Parliament, which would be equivalent to your Pentagon, to bring certain MPs together to talk about this. We got silence back. What does that tell you? I think it tells you everything, doesn't it?
And I've had, Drew Bledsoe on the show. He wrote the books UFO of God. UFO of God. He has all these videos and photographs and things, and just not him, but so many other people, they're keeping it to themselves.
Yes.
They want, I believe he might have he might be telling the truth.
I think I have his book.
Yeah, I do too. And he's a very brilliant, has a very brilliant mind, and his book's really good. But release, let because people like you, me, others, whoever, it may help the research. It may help us understand the phenomena better instead of keeping it.
Yeah,
I'm not saying this is what he's doing. And by no means, but people, you know, in the field, they use things like that, and it's almost like an ego, or it's a form of the ego, or they're keeping it for themselves for maybe another future book or a TV deal or whatever, you know. But I think this information needs to be released, though. We need full transparency within this field of research.
That's right. And also, I have no ego. I mean, I get attacked, but I am, as you find me, honest, grounded, and passionate for the truth. And I will share everything that I know. And there is so much more that I haven't spoken about. And it's not like, oh, I'm keeping that information. It's because I'm so enthralled and excited. But I will tell you something. This whole thing gives us hope. I and my twin brother have been in direct contact, right over us. That was the last one on the 9th of April, 2016 at precisely 11:15 p.m. at night. They were right there. They were filmed by my niece. It's a long story. It's in the book, Terrestrial Trespassers, and the one before that. But when you are touched by that and you look at them, you're thinking, oh my God. But at the same question, you're asking, why are you doing this? Because you know what we're doing, or maybe they don't, but I'm talking in terms of like, you know what we're doing, and we just want some answers, but none is ever given. But it gives us hope, and it fills my heart with joy, even though there is another side to this, because it gives us hope in the sense that we are much more, so much more than just biological entities with a sell-by date, and that we serve a system which does not give a damn about any of us. All it wants is money and power and total subjugation. I will not have it. And as for like going back into the World War II and World War I, most people saw and worked from one side and the other worked on the other, good and bad. But you had that balance, you see, and thank God that we are on the right side. That's all I can say.
Well, Philip, it was a treat, honor, privilege, man. I can't wait till the next conversation, my friend. Your research is phenomenal. I mean it. And I say it again, and people's going to agree with me. And I know I don't like when people compliment me, but I mean it. You got a brilliant mind, and just keep the good fight, man. Keep pushing forward and keep that brilliant mind, you know. Bring this research. We need more transparency, like I was talking about, and trying to get closer to what we're dealing with. And thank you very much, my friend.
Michael, it is an honor. And as I said, you are an incredible, amazing human being, spiritual being as well. And it is for all of us hitting a wall, but at least we can hit it hard enough to start making those cracks, and we can start making holes in there. We will crack it. We will get there. Don't you worry about that, sir. But thank you so much for having me on your show again. I'm very honored, as always, and grateful to you.